First, we celebrate 40 years of top-class motor racing in Grand Prix 500.
It was a day of nostalgia. If you loved Grand Prix racing, its history and legends, then Silverstone in July 1990 was the place to be, just as in May 1950, where the first World Championship began. Now, some of the great cars from the past were out on the old circuit one last time. But if the track will never be quite the same again, the memories will comfortably stay.
It's a royal occasion when Silverstone is chosen for the 1950 European Grand Prix. Moreover, this year, for the first time ever, there is to be an official world champion driver. It's to be decided on the points gained in 6 major races, and this is the first. Just a few miles from the end comes an unexpected stroke of bad luck. An oil pipe fractures on Fangio's car, and a conrod breaks. Farina starts the competition for World Championship with a healthy lead on points, while Fangio, politely applauding in the background, gets nothing.
This was not to be Fangio's championship, not yet. That first year it went to the man who had won at Silverstone, Dr. Giuseppe Farina. By the 1951 British Grand Prix, the Ferraris looked at last to be a genuine threat to Alfa Romeo. On lap 10, Fangio in the number 2 Alfa had taken the lead from Gonzalez's Ferrari number 12. But Fangio couldn't shake off his stocky fellow Argentine, and by lap 38 the Ferrari was back in front where it stayed. Alfa Romeo domination had at last been stemmed. For all that, though, it was an Alfa driver, Juan Manuel Fangio, who took the title that year. For 1952, the World Championship was run for Formula 2 cars, and Ferrari's Alberto Ascari won every single Grand Prix.
At Monza, with Ferrari and Maserati evenly matched, the Italian Grand Prix produced some magnificent motor racing. Ascari and Farina on Ferrari, Fangio and Marimont on Maserati were never more than 3 seconds apart for over half the race. Then Marimont made a pit stop, and the 3 world champions, Ascari, Farina and Fangio, raced 1, 2, 3, until the last sensational lap, when Ascari spun, Farina swerved to avoid him, and Fangio somehow found a gap to win his first major Grand Prix of the year, just 1.4 seconds ahead of Farina.
Despite that spin and Fangio's victory, Ascari easily held on to his World Championship crown. In 1954, true Grand Prix cars were back, with a new Formula One. Back to a Mercedes-Benz, but in Italy at least, the Ferraris were expected to run them close. Ascari's Ferrari led most of the Italian Grand Prix, but when he retired with a blown engine, first place passed to Stirling Moss's red Maserati, number 28. A dozen laps from the end, though, Moss was sidelined with a cracked oil pipe, leaving Fangio a fortunate victory to clinch his second title. Mercedes, understandably, saw no good reason to change very much for 1955, but they did add a new driver.
I came in and I'm sort of wiping my face with a rag, and this German came up and clicked his heels, bowed, and there was a bowl of hot water, and over his arm was the towel and a bit of soap in his hand. And this is like in the middle of nowhere, and I thought, my God, this is efficient, you know. And that's what it was like. I mean, Mercedes were absolutely in a class of their own from that point of view.
By the 1955 British Grand Prix at Aintree, Ascari had been kill testing, and the Mercedes of Fangio and Moss were untouchable.
I can't remember the exact setup, but I remember coming up to a back marker, and I thought, well, he's going to get, yeah. And then I got past him.
And so a British driver leads in the British Grand Prix, albeit in a German car.
I used everything I could, and I got a good lead, fairly good lead. But then coming towards the end, Fangio was up with me again. And I remember going round the last corner. Round the last corner, the start line was 200, 300 yards away. And I was in, say, second, I don't remember exactly, but probably second, and I put my foot flat on the floor, pulled right over, and waved Fangio past. And I thought, well, God, if he's got another 50 horsepower, he's going to do it. Otherwise, you know, no way. And I thought it was a nice gesture.
Past the pits in as near line abreast as makes no difference. They get the checkered flag and go on to their lap of honour.
I've asked him since, and I said, look, you know, you did back off, didn't you? Because after all, it was the British Grand Prix. He said, no. He said, you know, you were on form that day, and that, you know, it was your race. Half my problem with Fangio was that I felt he was better. He was faster. Backed up by the fact that he probably was.
At the next race, Monza, the status quo was restored, Moss finishing second to Fangio, world champion again. But it was the end for Mercedes, who withdrew at the end of 1955, leaving Fangio to go to Ferrari, where he duly won his 4th title. But at the 1957 British Grand Prix, Fangio, now with Maserati, was never in contention. Moss's Van Wall led until its engine expired, after which his team called in the injured Tony Brooks, and Stirling took over.
Moss was back in the race, but the delay had put him in 9th place. Vera in the Maserati now led the field as Moss set off in pursuit. One by one, he overhauled his rivals and, shattering the lap record 4 times, finally went to the front once more. Setting up a commanding lead, Moss came in to take on 10 gallons of fuel and a bottle of pop in 27 seconds. Some going. Then back for those final laps and a place in motor racing history. So, with the Ferraris and the Maseratis trailing behind, Stirling, Moss and the Van Wall came home alone. Victory at an average speed of 86.8 miles an hour.
The voice of Murray Walker has become synonymous with Grand Prix racing. He has been a devotee all his life, a commentator for most of it. So who better to select an especially memorable race from each decade? From the 1950s, it was easy.
That's the 1957 German Grand Prix at the Nurburgring. Why? Partly because it's the Nurburgring, but especially because the man who dominated it and who won it in an absolutely unique way was the great Juan Manuel Fangio.
Fangio's greatest race began when he stopped for fuel and tyres, after leading from Mike Hawthorne and Peter Collins.
And eventually the car was ready and the crowd was shouting from the grandstand, "Fangio, Fangio!" And he sort of lazily turned round as if to say, well, I think I've given them enough time now.
10 laps to go and 45 seconds to pick up. Fangio begins the race of his life.
I believe that race in 1957 was in fact my greatest. I've never been a spectacular driver, and on that particular occasion we had practiced the pit stops and we had achieved a tyre change time of 30 seconds. However, when I actually stopped in the pits on that occasion, the tyre change took those 30 seconds plus another 48. I went out on the track in an attempt to catch the 2 in front of me, and I didn't think I had a chance. However, my technique was to take a higher gear going into a corner than I would normally do to make up time, and gradually I was able to make up that time. I had an advantage because the 2 in front of me, Hawthorne and Collins, didn't really think I was going to catch them up, but when I saw them in front of me, I knew I had them.
Into the north turn, and the fantastic Fangio takes Collins on the inside, and with a lap and a half to go, he leads the race, a race in which he broke the lap record 10 times in 22 laps, reducing it from 9 minutes 37.4 seconds to 9 minutes 17.4, to prove beyond all doubt his claim to immortality as one of the greatest drivers the world has ever known.
A fantastic victory, even by Fangio standards, and his last before retirement as world champion for the 5th time. When they came to Casablanca for the final race of 1958, the championship was between Moss's Van Wall and Hawthorne's Ferrari.
I remember that, the hype, there was enormous hype in the press, understandably because you know, after all, there were 2 English drivers to start with, which was, I suppose, fairly unusual to be going for the title of the same nationality. And, yeah, but things were much more laid back, really. I mean, the press would get everything hyped up, but I mean, as drivers, we were much more laid back, I think, really.
The odds were strongly with Hawthorne. Moss had to win and set fastest lap, for which there was then an extra point. But even so, Hawthorne had only to finish second to take the title. Moss and number 8 led from the start, while teammate Brooks tried to hold off Hawthorne for as long as possible. Stuart Lewis Evans in Van Wall number 12 was also trying to help Moss. when his engine failed. The car ran off the road and caught fire, Lewis Evans tragically suffering burns from which he would die. Late in the race, Ferrari's Phil Hill gave up second place to Hawthorn. So, with only one victory compared with Moss's 4, Hawthorn it was who took the title.
I didn't drink anyway, and I restrained my running around a bit, you know. I wasn't going out with girls quite as seriously as I had been. And I really had taken it seriously. I thought, well, you know, I'm going to really work at this. And then I go and lose it to Mike Hawthorn, who was really having a ball. You know, I mean, Mike was that sort of guy, and I thought, well, it was very unfair. I mean, no justice at all. And I do remember being a bit teed off, yeah.
A piece of tragic irony, however, the new world champion lost his life 3 months later in a road accident on the Guildford bypass. After the death of Lewis Evans, Van Wall withdrew from racing, and in 1959 new names came to the fore. But at Sebring, the last race of the year, Moss in a Rob Walker Cooper was again going for the title.
3 laps gone, and Moss is 5 seconds up, with the 2 Coopers of Brabham and McLaren trying to close. But now the orders change. Brabham leads with McLaren second.
What's happened to Moss? That lucky 7 Cooper is out of the race already. The transmission's gone, and with it, Stirling Moss's hopes of the World Championship.
Now Brabham has got the race in his hands. Supported by teammate McLaren, nobody can touch him now. And team manager John Cooper welcomes his winner home. But there's something wrong. It's McLaren, number 9, who takes the checkered flag. There's consternation in the Cooper pit. Brabham should have come through first. But Jack Brabham, out of petrol, is still in the race. Jack Brabham pushes his way to the Motor Racing Championship of the world.
Yes, I knew I had to get across the line with the car. And of course, I led the race right up to the last 500 or 600 yards. And because the car ran out of petrol, and I had to push it over the last few yards over the line. And but it did clinch the championship for me, so it was worth pushing. It was uphill too.
Not all uphill, though. In 1959 and 60, Jack Brabham and Cooper took the titles, also swinging a lamp over the future. From now on, the driver's place was in front of the engine.
Guess where? Yes, Monte Carlo, a small principality in the Stirling area. And as usual, all eyes are focused upon him. Even an extra 30 brake horsepower is no substitute for the skill of Moss. As round and round the classic Monaco circuit, he drives the race of his life.
Ferraris of Richie Ginther and Phil Hill had a big power advantage over Moss's Lotus in that first race for the new 1.5-litre Formula One. But they were not Stirling.
I thought, well, I'm going to really try and go, and that was the only thing I could try to do. And then, of course, they hung on, you know, did get a bit big, went up to 6 seconds, then back to 4 and 3 and so on. But at the start, that was my intention. Then I realized I couldn't do it. So then I thought, well, okay, I'm just going to keep on as hard as I can. And that was when, going through this, I was convinced they were playing with me, because first it was one car and then another car, and then it would be 6 seconds, it'd come down to 4 and then go up a bit. I thought, well, you know, they're just passing back markers, slowing them up and so on. And I didn't realize, because I couldn't actually see, we didn't have radios, but I couldn't see them giving all these rather exotic signals to you know, Phil and Richie. So saying, now give all and all that sort of, I didn't see those because they didn't put them out because I'd gone past. No. And so I didn't know they were really trying. If I'd known they were trying, I reckon I might have been a bit quicker, you know, but it didn't happen. And I couldn't believe it. And when I came across and actually saw the flag, and they went right past me, it was absolutely quite a most amazing time. And literally was. The one thing it proves to me, though, is that you can work out anything about a vehicle, the strength, you can work out the lateral G and the tire wear and all that, but you can't work out the human element. And that is what I think still keeps our sports as such an important one.
Still, it was essentially a Ferrari year. In France, Italy's Giancarlo Baghetti became the only driver ever to win his first Grand Prix. At Monza, though, there was stark tragedy when the Ferrari of world champion-elect Wolfgang von Trips crashed with Jim Clark's Lotus on the second lap of the Italian Grand Prix.
Von Trips is killed. So too are 11 spectators on that hot afternoon in Italy. Phil Hill leads the diminished field. Ahead of him lies the prize of prizes, the championship of the world. As he takes takes the winner's laurels, Phil Hill does not know the fate of his teammate. He wins the Italian Grand Prix, and with it, the World Championship.
Hill would never win another Grand Prix, though. And it was another Hill, Graham, who took the title for BRM in 1962, narrowly beating Jimmy Clark. But the following year, it was the other way round, with the dominant Clark scoring 7 victories en route to the first of his 2 championships. In 1964, another Briton joined Clark and Hill in the fight for the title, John Surtees in the Ferrari. But in the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps, the cards fell for Clark. In the early laps, Gurney and Surtees went clear of Clark's number 23 Lotus, but the Ferrari was soon out, leaving Gurney's Brabham alone at the front. Clark, too, needed a pit stop later in the race, and was only 4th at the start of the last lap. By then, though, Dan Gurney, in number 15, was running low on fuel. Hill and Bruce McLaren were in similar trouble, and Clark passed both. On the last lap, Gurney ran dry, allowing Clark to pass. But on the slowing down lap, Jimmy himself ran out of fuel. It was one of the few fortunate victories of his career. Late in the season, Surtees made a charge for the title. This win in Italy and second place in America, setting up a championship decider in Mexico. Hill led on points from Surtees and Clark, so what Graham wanted most of all was to stay out of trouble, finish well. But Surtees' Ferrari teammate, Lorenzo Bandini, hadn't been told.
Clark leads. Dan Gurney is there too, but Graham Hill is well placed.
And I saw all the smoking tyres and things and locked up brakes as first one and first the other would dice into the hairpin over the back. And I thought, well, here's an accident about to happen, that's for sure. And sure enough, it did happen.
Hill's BRM was damaged and out of the picture. In the closing stages, Bandini let Surtees pass him, but even so, it looked like Clark's championship until the last lap.
The Lotus is out. A surprise Dan Gurney wins the race for Brabham, and John Surtees get the World Championship. Oh, what a finale.
Surtees' title then, but the following year, Clark was virtually unopposed and strolled to his second title in 3 years.
But he was a wonderful man, a wonderful friend, and a fantastic racing driver. I don't know of another racing driver who drove with the smoothness, the delicacy, the precision, the calculations that he drove with, probably totally unaware of what he was doing.
Jack Brabham was champion in 1966, thus becoming the first man to win the title in a car of his own construction, and a Brabham won the following year too.
In '67, when I won the championship, if Jack had stuck to, or kept some of the gear that I had, he probably would have won the championship. But he would try something new all the time, like maybe new camshafts, valves, or valve springs, or something like that, and occasionally they would break and let him down, and I had the good old reliable stuff. Probably not the same horsepower, but reliable, and you've got to be there at the finish.
Not quite always there at the finish that year with the new Ford DFV engines, designed by Keith Duckworth.
Well, George, I think we've now got a reasonable block. I think all we have to do is put these 2 marks on here, and then take it into the dig bore and start machining.
Jimmy Clark's new Lotus 49 won with the engine first time out in Holland, and although reliability was suspect at first, the DFV was clearly the future.
I've actually chosen the 1967 Italian Grand Prix. Now, when the race started, there was a terrific scrap. Jim Clark, Graham Hill and Denny Hulme. And they kept that up for a long time, until on the 13th lap, Jim Clark came in to change a tyre. Finish. He was out of the race, as far as everybody was concerned, except Jim Clark.
7th by lap 34, 5th by lap 47. By lap 53, the astonishing Clark is up to 4th.
Meantime, here's John Surtees in the new Honda, which we haven't seen racing before, and Chris Amon in the new Ferrari, which we haven't seen racing before. And down in this group will be the leaders. And that was Graham Hill. Graham Hill either trailing smoke or dust. It's Graham Hill. Coming out of Lesmo there in a great cloud of smoke, or as I say, it could have been cement dust. No, I think it's Graham Hill coming limping into the pits now in the Lotus Ford, also blown up. Jim Clark, in fact, could win this race now with Graham Hill out. Jack Brabham in the lead by about 29 seconds from John Surtees in second place with the Honda. And now Jim Clark closing fast on Surtees to challenge that second place. And he's passed the Honda. And he's passed the Honda into second place. And by Jove, he's going to take the lead on this lap. Jim Clark has achieved the incredible. If he can get up alongside and pass Jack Brabham, he'll take the lead with 8 laps to go. And that's Jim Clark. Jim Clark going through the south curve, throwing up the dust, and it's Jack Brabham in second place. And they're both pulled clear of the Honda. It's Jim Clark in the lead. As they come up to the completion of the 61st lap, it's Jim Clark with the Lotus Ford in the lead from Jack Brabham. John Surtees third with the Honda. And the Honda is in second place. It's John Surtees in the Honda in second place, Jack Brabham third. As they come up to the 65th lap, a lap with 3 laps to go, it's the Honda in second place. And Jack Brabham is slipstreaming John Surtees. Jim Clark completes his 65th lap. Jack Brabham pulls out. Jack Brabham pulling out to take the Honda after grabbing a bit of slipstreaming, and that's going on for every last foot. And it's the Honda in the lead. The Honda's in the lead. And Jim Clark is third. It's John Surtees in the lead, Jack Brabham second, and Jim Clark third. It's Jack Brabham who is slipstreaming John Surtees. John Surtees in the white car, Jack Brabham coming through on the inside on the Brabham. Fiercely snaking under the braking, it's Jack Brabham who takes the lead. Jack Brabham leads John Surtees, but John Surtees comes back on the inside. And it's John Surtees who retakes the lead. As they come up out of the south curve, the two cars are virtually neck and neck, but it's John Surtees ahead of Jack Brabham, and Jack Brabham pulls out, and Surtees wins.
That open space up the inside was too much of a temptation. And I think perhaps if I'd been in his position, I would have been tempted to do it as well.
The reason I was able to pass him on the inside, there was oil that had been dropped on the inside and somebody had put cement over it. And that left a line down the inside, which people were avoiding. That was the only hole I had, and I went down that inside and got in the oil and couldn't quite stop enough for the corner to be able to get a good line out of it. And John Surtees had a better line out of the corner, although I came out first. He had the run on me. And he just passed me by about the width of a tyre going over the line.
Sadly, motor racing was soon to lose the incomparable Clark. In April of 1968, he was killed in a minor Formula 2 race at Hockenheim in Germany.
The loss of Jim Clark in April of '68, I think, was like to motor racing what the atomic bomb may have been to the world during the Second World War. It was something that nobody could truly believe would have occurred. The dimensions of it were so drastic and so devastating to us all. I think for the first time we've truly realized that motor racing was or could be hopelessly dangerous.
Ironically, it was in Germany again, this time at the Nurburgring, that Stewart, in appalling weather, drove the race of his life.
I said, why do I have to go? I'm going to shunt the car. You know, we don't know where the track is. We don't know how deep the water is. That's why you have to go out to stage. You've got to find out where the rivers are, and he was right.
And Jackie didn't want to go out, and I insisted that he went out. It's the first time I've ever had to, if you like, make a driver drive, and I didn't like that very much.
I passed Chris Amon at the bottom of the descent to Adenauer Bridge, and then pulled out a huge lead by the end of the first lap, unknown to me. I couldn't see anything, but the spray was so bad and the fog was so bad. You were searching your way through the fog. And I think I passed the start-finishing line in the first lap, something like a 30-second lead. It was a long lead, I recall afterwards being told this. So it was a very difficult race for me. Aquaplaning everywhere, searching for visibility, but yet having to keep the pressure on because you knew that at any moment you could have spun out, gone wide, or done worse. I ended up by winning the race by 4 minutes, which in those days was, even today, it must be a very large amount of time.
For all Stewart's ability, it seemed somehow appropriate in 1968 that Graham Hill, fighting nobly for Lotus in the aftermath of Clark's death, should win the championship.
But at Monza that year, I categorically spent the entire weekend playing towards the last lap.
The teams were being paid according to their position at quarter distance, half distance, three-quarter distance, and full distance. And as it was going to be a slipstreaming race, I had this arrangement with Jackie where when he came up to quarter distance, we'd give him a countdown, lap 3, lap 2, lap 1, so that when he went by at quarter distance, he would be in first place and receive first place prize money for quarter distance. He achieved this at quarter distance, he achieved it again at half distance, and at three-quarter distance, and most important of all, he won the race. It was like a cash register going on in his head.
We're looking down at the approach to the Parabolica, down to the Vialoni, 185 miles an hour, 4 cars virtually together, and down to the Parabolica they come. Can Stewart hold the line? On this, the last lap, somebody's challenging, it's Rindt going through. Jock and Rindt takes the lead at the Parabolica on the last corner of the last lap. Beltoire's going through. It's Beltoire's taking the lead, and it's going to be a French match for to win. It must be. It's over the line together, and it's almost a dead heat. It's Jackie Stewart, Rindt, Beltoire's, and McLaren. Nobody has ever seen the finish of a motor race like that.
The Cosworth engine took every race that year, with Stewart's Matra winning more often than not. Monaco 1970 has passed into racing legend. This is what happened to Brabham at the last corner of the last lap.
Pierre's carriage had run out of petrol just before the last corner, and that was just one of those decisions. I took the wrong decision, went down on the inside of him instead of the outside of him, and of course all the sand was on the inside, and I just couldn't stop for the corner. And Rindt got by me for the lead.
Rindt went on to become world champion, but was killed in practice for the Italian Grand Prix. He's the only man to have won the title posthumously.
But Jochen was really a tiger of a driver and would have gone on, I think, to win more than one world championship, although I think he would have retired before too long. He wasn't in love with motorsport. He loved it, but he wasn't in love.
It's all too easy to end up at Monza when you're choosing good races because you're looking for things which have been competitive and exciting, and Monza was always that before the chicanes. Not always now, unfortunately. But for 1971, I've chosen the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. It was the 3-litre formula, and we had Tyrrells and Brabhams and BRMs and Ferraris, McLarens, Lotus, March. There were 8 people who led that Italian Grand Prix at some time during the race. Then, as so very often happens, people fell by the wayside. Amon went out, Siffert went out. But in the end, just like previous races at Monza, but even more so, it was a slipstreamer to the end. Peter Gethin in the BRM won his only Grand Prix, one of the most memorable of all time in the BRM. He won it by a metre from Ronnie Peterson and François Saveur and Mike Harewood, and 0.3 of a second covered the first 4 home. And Peter Gethin won at an average speed of, if I remember correctly, just under 151 miles an hour, and that's still the fastest Grand Prix of all time. It was an incredible race.
But it was Stewart, now driving a Tyrrell, who took his second title. Although he lost it the following season to Brazil's first world champion, Emerson Fittipaldi of Lotus.
In those times where his drive, if you get the results, it was not very quick, but he was very careful with the car and he finished all the races. And those times, durability in the car was very bad, and you have to be very, very soft in the car. And he was a man, he always depart 5th and 6th and all finish in the end, or 2nd or 3rd. He didn't have much quick laps, he didn't have much pole position, but he always finished well in the points and win the championship and making points.
Jackie Stewart was making a point the following year.
Jody Scheckter ahead of Danny Hulme, and then Francois Sebert. Jody Schechter's lost it. Jody Scheckter has been hit. A multiple shunt.
It was a selection of tires. We had new tires. We had a hard tire on one of the sides, and it was new. And I came in and it was cold, I think, going into that corner, and just got away from me. One of those things. The thing I remember about it is the team manager holding me back and Surtees trying to attack me afterwards. I think that's the thing I remember most about it. They were trying to hide me away after.
Although Peter Revson was eventually to win the restarted race, Stewart and Lotus's Ronnie Peterson were the main attraction.
And here's the duel between the JPS and the Tyrrell, and Jackie Stewart was really closing on Ronnie Peterson at Beckett's there and got into a bit too much of a slide for comfort, but he's closing a little now. As we look down from the airship, we see that the Tyrrell, in fact, has it on the fastest section of the course. He's closing right up. Jackie Stewart overtaking on the inside and very nearly losing it. Right through the markers on the inside and Stewart. He's still sliding and he's still in trouble. He was in 120-mile-an-hour skid there, and now he's really in the agricultural business.
Tragically, Stewart's teammate, Francois Sebert, was killed in practice for the last race of the year at Watkins Glen, so Stewart withdrew from what would have been his 100th and final Grand Prix. He did, however, retire with the World Championship, his 3rd in 5 years. The following season, Emerson Fittipaldi, now with McLaren, won his 2nd, fighting Ferrari all the way. But in 1975, Niki Lauda and team manager Luca Montezemolo made it a year for Maranello.
Niki formed a very, very powerful team with Luca, who after all, was an administrator, not a racing man. And between them, they turned Ferrari round completely. Niki told him what to do, and Luca went out and got it done.
To such good effect that Lauda waltzed to the championship, beating Fittipaldi by nearly 20 points. One of the sport's greatest characters, Graham Hill, died that year, only months after retiring. The plane crash also took the lives of Tony Bryce, his new driver, and several other team members. Through a controversial and dramatic 1976 season, the leading players were James Hunt and Niki Lauda. The Austrian began the year wonderfully, and by the time of the Spanish Grand Prix easily led the championship. But Hunt won well in Spain, only to be disqualified at post-race scrutineering. Although his victory was reinstated on appeal, it set the tone for the season.
The only problem is we were using slightly different tires, which had a little bit bigger bulge, and that's the widest point on the car. Yeah. And it was, in fact, I think 3/8 of an inch too wide or something, minuscule.
Just under 2 centimetres.
Yeah. And that was purely the bulge in the tires.
At the British Grand Prix, there was yet greater controversy when the Ferraris of Lauda and Regazzoni touched at the first corner, triggering a multiple accident. Hunt won the restarted race from Lauda, but afterwards Ferrari protested, claiming repair work done on Hunt's car before the second start had been illegal.
There was nothing in the rule book, nothing, there were no grounds in the rules that could possibly suggest that I was going to be disqualified or it was ever going to be a problem. As a result, I think McLaren's, led by Teddy Mayer, didn't prepare any defence properly for when it went to Paris in September.
I think he drove a very good race there. But you know, the judges in Paris said that he was illegal in the race, therefore he disqualified him. But I think he changed a bit, and I think it's not right what he did, because I think he should respect the sport as it is, even if things are going wrong for him.
Things had gone appallingly wrong for Lauda at the Nurburgring, where he came close to losing his life.
When I came to the hospital, you know, you feel a kind of you feel like you are very tired, and you would like to go and sleep. But you know it's not just going sleeping, it's something else. And then you just fight with the brain. You hear noises and you hear voices, and you just try to listen what they're saying, and you try to keep your brain working and to get the body ready to fight against the illness. And I think this was very good that I did that, because in that way I survived.
Incredibly, Lauda was back for Monza just 6 weeks later. But Hunt had cut his points lead, and this victory in America gave him a shot at the title in Japan, the last race of the year. As they gathered in the rain at Fuji, Lauda had 3 more points than Hunt. The race was delayed in the hope conditions would improve, but when they didn't, the cars were flagged away, and Hunt took an immediate lead. After 2 laps, Lauda pulled in and retired. His life, he said, was more important than the World Championship, and perhaps he was the bravest man in the place. Hunt continued in the lead, despite spirited attacks from Brambilla and others. And while Lauda looked on, the title seemed assured. But then James had to pit for new tyres. Now he needed 3rd place points to win the title.
The pit signals that I got were not consistent, right? By the end of the race, they've got, from their lap chart, what turned out to be correct. But 3 laps before the end of the race, they were giving me a complete jumble of signals, and then suddenly it said 4th, which I probably was at the time because I passed somebody else to finish 3rd, right? But with their track record for handling things in a crisis and a panic, I wasn't prepared to believe McLaren's and their lap chart, and because I'd had too many disappointments already that year with things happening after the race.
No disappointments this time, though. Hunt was indeed 3rd and therefore world champion. A single point separated him from the gallant Lauda. Nicky was back the following year, though, champion again for Ferrari. It was all Lotus in 1978. Mario Andretti becoming champion, although grieving for his teammate Ronnie Peterson, who died at Monza. The first turbo win came at Dijon in 1979, but everyone remembers the fight for 2nd place.
And Arnou's going to do it. René Arnoux is challenging for 2nd as they come up to Villeroy, but Villeneuve will not give way. Arnou's got the inside line and the shorter line, and he takes 2nd place as they go into the right-hander and the left at Sablière. And now Renault's indeed are 1st and 2nd in the French Grand Prix, and the French crowd is going mad, roaring in the background. The twin-turbo Renaults appeared at Monaco, not their circuit. And now we're into the start. He's closed right up on Villeneuve, and he's going to try again. They're coming into the start of the last lap behind Jochen Maas in the A2 Aeros. And Arnoux does it, does he? And Villeneuve locks up. And Villeneuve has had to go wide, and Arnoux's on the inside as they go round Villeroy. He's got the shorter line. He's got Arnoux. To La Bretelle, 80th. 80th lap in this 80-lap race, and there's less than 1/3 of it to go. Now, can Arnoux, on the tremendously fast La Combe Cours de Pouar section, 150 miles an hour, get past? They go past Jochen Maas, and Jabouille wins. Jean-Pierre Jabouille has won in the Renault. Who is going to be 2nd? Into the Cours de Pouar they come. There is Riccardo Patrese, and Villeneuve is 2nd. Arnoux is 3rd.
In Holland, Villeneuve's leading Ferrari had a tyre going down.
Yes, and Villeneuve's lost it. Incredible. Villeneuve, 360-degree spin. Jones manages to avoid him and goes through and takes the lead. Fantastic. Alan Jones.
But Villeneuve's unquenchable spirit made him a legend the world over.
We had a good relationship. I think he wanted to win every lap and not win races. He wanted to be impressive in that way, and that's what he did. He was a very fast driver, but wasn't at the stage where he was a good winner.
Which was fortunate for Scheckter, who took the title that year in a Ferrari clean sweep. The Italian cars were nowhere in 1980, however. At the penultimate race of the year in Montreal, the championship was between Alan Jones's Williams and Nelson Piquet's Brabham.
At the start of the race, we screamed down to the first corner, and I got the jump on him, held my line, and we touched, and he went into the fence and damaged that car severely, his race car.
It seems a long time. It's go. And Piquet's pulling across in front of Pironi, and Jones is round in front of him, and it's a multiple crash already on the first lap, and Piquet's off.
Well, a very sad race for me because in the first start, Alan pushed me in the wall. I have to change for the spare car, and I did another start, and I overtake Alan after 3 laps, and I open about 15 seconds, and my engine blew up, and I lost the championship in that race.
Jones put a double lock on the title with victory in the final race, handing Frank Williams his first championship.
Not a brilliantly exciting circuit, but an absolutely riveting race, and that's the Spanish Grand Prix at Jarama. And Villeneuve had a car which handled like a barn door. It was appalling, but he got this fantastically powerful V6 turbocharged engine bolted onto the back of it, and he knew that from row 4 he had got to make a good start. He made a fantastic start. From row 4 he was third by the first corner. On the second lap he was second only to Alan Jones, and Alan led for 17 laps with Villeneuve chasing him hard and all the rest in line stern behind. And then Alan, most atypically, went off and allowed Villeneuve through, and of course Alan was history then, he did finish the race. But from then on, Villeneuve, by just keeping his line on the corners, going like smoke down the straights, letting nobody past him on the straights, knowing that on the corners, knowing that no one could get past him on the straights, stayed in front from lap 17 until lap 80. 1 second covered the first quarter. You never knew who was going to be coming around first. It was incredible. Real cliffhanger.
At Silverstone that year, an early incident put several cars out, but John Watson in a McLaren squeezed through the carnage somehow to take an emotional home victory.
And I felt something, experienced something which I've never experienced previously and I had never seen at a British race before, and that was the public. They just en masse came across the barriers and onto the track, and they cheered. And I can even now, talking about it, feel the tingles. They were cheering for me, and I couldn't understand why. I'd just done the job. I won the race, and I can understand in your own country what it means to someone. But it just seemed to be on the day the crowd at Silverstone were looking for a British victory. They got it with me, and they expressed their appreciation in the best possible way they could, and it was just, a memory I will never forget.
The championship, though, went to Nelson Piquet by a point from Carlos Reutemann. Imola in 1982 was to become notorious.
And Villeneuve made a mistake. He just went wide, lost traction, and Pironi nipped through. Just a little mistake from Villeneuve, and that's what it's cost him. It's cost him the lead. Yeah, Villeneuve's well placed now. He's picking up the draft well. He's going to be alongside. Which side's Pironi going to keep? Pironi, I think, has made him go the way he shouldn't have done. The long way around, Villeneuve's inside. Ooh! Absolutely side by side. But Villeneuve's got the line up the hill into the next corner.
And look at the ATS right in the line of both of them, and Villeneuve takes his opportunity, comes out to the left, and it could be that Pironi's going to be balked, and they go through absolutely together, and Villeneuve leads again. And look at that, Pironi and Villeneuve absolutely together.
Pironi's in the lead. Pironi's just nipped through. Unfortunately, the direction was away, but Villeneuve is going to respond here, possibly.
And he's done it. We are around the Tamburello, and see Pironi now. He's going through.
He's got to come down the inside. He's got him. Oh, he's going wide. Oh, fantastic stuff. They've changed places on 2 laps running, and Pironi now, all he has to do now is keep it pointing the right way. And no mistakes, because there really isn't a passing place. Unless Villeneuve can have a go up here, there aren't really any more passing places on the lap. So it looks as if Pironi's done it.
He had, but according to Villeneuve, by duplicity. 2 weeks later, still livid and unsettled, the Canadian crashed to his death during qualifying for the Belgian Grand Prix. Monaco that year was extraordinary. Late in the race, Alain Prost's leading Renault broke, crashing into the barriers. And into an unexpected first place went a man who had never previously won a Grand Prix.
And I went into the lead and I said, okay, Riccardo, you have to make 1.5 lap now, go very slow because it's damp. But I was not slow enough because I spun. And I said, oh my God. And while I was spinning, I saw some cars coming through, like the Ferrari of Pironi, the Alfa Romeo of the Cesaris, and even Williams.
Patrese is on the move again, very fast, but no hope of catching Pironi, who goes into the the tunnel for the light. Is that Peroni stationary? It is! My goodness! The third leader in 2 laps.
He must have run out of petrol. There's a big problem for the Ferrari engine is very, very thirsty. They have a fuel problem, and he could have run out of petrol.
And that is De Cesaris's car. But De Cesaris would have taken the lead when Peroni... So that means to say that Derek Daly could win this race. Patrese could win.
Patrese did win, but it was Keke Rosberg's flair and consistency which took the title for Williams. Nelson Piquet's second title was snatched from Alain Prost in the final race of 1983. But Prost's only rival the following year was his McLaren teammate Niki Lauda. To be champion, Prost had to win in Portugal.
So now Prost having another look, but and this time he's got a good draft, and I think he's inside him, yes, and Alain Prost takes the lead, and I'm sure he's going to pull away now.
For the title, Lauda needed only second place. After a poor grid position and a cautious start, the number 8 McLaren was 5th by lap 28 and chasing Keke Rosberg.
As Lauda goes past the Williams, and he is definitely in 4th position. And they're battling for 3rd position. Still Prost first and Mansell second. And Lauda is going through this time, surely. He's got the line. And yes, indeed, as they go into turn 1 at the end of lap 33, Lauda is up into 3rd place. Only Mansell between him and his teammate Prost.
But not for long. Eventually, Mansell's brakes failed, leaving Lauda in the second place he needed.
I only know that the last year's one was the most difficult one in the way of having to fight to the last race to finish second behind Prost and then beat him by half a point. So from this point of view, it was, sure I remember it.
I was not too disappointed because that was a very good season in terms of ambience in the team, and with Niki we enjoy very much racing together.
There was more high drama in Portugal the following year. In dreadful conditions, many cars spun off and crashed. But Ayrton Senna, who had nearly won in similar conditions at Monte Carlo a year earlier, drove flawlessly in the Lotus to win his first Grand Prix.
And off goes Prost and regains and spin. Alain Prost spins right off, and he's going to be out of the race with a smashed rear wing.
The victorious Senna now rejoiced that he had served his apprenticeship in England.
I guess having been racing in England before Formula One for a few years, with the English weather has taught me a lot.
No weather problems for anyone at Brands Hatch in 1985, and none of any kind for Nigel Mansell.
Look at this, a terrific scrap for the lead, and there's a change because the Williams has gone past Ayrton Senna, who has therefore lost the lead, and he has lost it to Nigel Mansell, and now he comes out of clearways and takes the checkered flag, and Nigel Mansell has won.
Alain Prost's 4th place was enough to give the popular Frenchman his elusive first title, and by quite a margin. In 1986, a Williams Honda was the thing to have, but in Spain, at the new Jerez track, it wasn't quite enough for Mansell.
It's going to be one of the closest Grand Prix finishes, whatever happens, that we've seen for a long, long time. They're coming up to the hairpin now. This is it. Down into second gear, and Mansell, if he gets it right, can sprint out of the rear wing of Senna's car. Senna moves across. He's keeping Mansell back, and he wins. Mansell won't like that any more than he likes at Brazil.
On Friday and Saturday, the start and finish line was here, and for the actual race, if you recall, they actually moved the start and finish line back towards the corner by 30 metres for timing reasons or whatever, but it wasn't in the same place. I mean, they never told any of the drivers, so, I mean, come Sunday we were racing, and, you know, I'd saved it and I came out the corner, I pressed my overtake boost button, and there I was, and if you look, literally about 20 feet past the line where the flag was, I was in front, and I thought I'd won.
If Mansell felt hard done by then, much worse awaited him at the Foster's Australian Grand Prix. As he followed Keke Rosberg and Nelson Piquet, he knew 3rd place would make him world champion.
And then the lap previously to the problem I had, Keke, who was leading the race, and it was his last race, if you remember, and if Keke would have won, I'd have been champion as well. And he had a tyre problem, but everyone thought the engine had broken. Even Pepe thought his engine had exploded. And then by the time we'd radioed probably 10 laps before this saying, you know, we're coming in for tyres, you know, said quite rightly, because Goodyear had examined other people's tyres, saying there's no problem, you're doing the lap time, stay out. There's only 16 laps to go, 20 laps to go, it's no problem. And then, of course, going down the main straight, I remember pressing the overtake boost to get past Philippe Alliot and then to come in behind Alan again. And then the tyre just let go in the biggest possible way, which everyone saw, so I don't need to go into that.
Hey, look at that! Out that, and colossally, that's Mansell! That is Nigel Mansell, and the car absolutely shattered. He's fighting for control, and you can see what's happened. Mansell is out of the race. Now, this could change and will change the World Championship.
Certainly it did, and Prost found himself a somewhat surprised world champion in a season largely dominated by Williams. Mansell's most dramatic win came at Silverstone the following year. An unplanned but necessary pit stop left him chasing teammate Piquet on fresh tyres but a long way behind.
And then I believe in the last 19 laps we broke the track record 11 times, and then did that fantastic dummy down hanger straight, and shall we say there wasn't much room between us going into Stowe. And of course it was just a sensational victory because it was almost unheard of. And then for me, the engine blew up on the slow down lap. I actually had meltdown on the pistons and the turbo because I had the turbo full up, full boost for about the last 6 laps, and I was out of fuel on the last lap because that was the year that we had to sort of regulate the fuel, and I was minus fuel going on the last lap, and I just thought, it's a British Grand Prix, there's no way I'm stroking it, I'm gone.
Gone too was Jackie Stewart's long-held record of race victories, as Alain Prost won the Portuguese Grand Prix, the 28th of his career. Although Mansell won twice as many races as Williams' Honda teammate Piquet, the Brazilian's better consistency made him world champion. Controversy at Monza. Ayrton Senna perhaps chanced too much when he lapped Jean-Louis Schlesser's Williams at the chicane. Without that incident, McLaren Honda would have been unbeaten in 1988. A month after Enzo Ferrari's death, his cars finished 1-2 at home. In Japan, the championship fight was an all-McLaren affair between Senna and Prost. And when the Brazilian almost stalled at the start, race and title looked Prost for the taking. But this was to be Senna's day of days.
That was a tremendous race. As you know, at the start, I almost stole the engine. From pole position, went back to 15th, 16th place on the first corner. And to recover all those positions with traffic, lapping people, overtaking people, and catch Prost, who had a clear circuit all the way, it was a tremendous achievement for me.
Senna is getting close to him, and Senna is going to challenge for the lead. Ayrton Senna has got the lead. And that was exactly as we predicted as a possible situation. The traffic definitely held Alain Prost up, and Prost will be pretty upset.
It was a beautiful result, and I guess it's the way a driver can dream about winning a championship in such a style.
The same cannot be said for the way the title was decided in 1989. The McLaren teammates, now open enemies, went into a race that Senna had to win to keep a flame under his title hopes. Senna got going again, eventually overtaking Sandro Nannini to win the race. But FISA, the sport's governing body, disqualified him, confirming Prost as champion and sparking one of the greatest controversies the sport has known.
I think it's a sad way of having a championship finish. I think I wanted to win Japan the same way I did in '88. But unfortunately, that's the way it went. In 1990, the competition has been very strong. Difference between cars so small, and we have seen many different situations where people were involved in incidents. Different cars, different drivers, different circuits. And Japan, unfortunately, was another example of it.
And Senna sprints away, but Alain Prost takes the lead. It happened. happen. Alain Prost has taken the advantage. Senna is trying to go through on the inside, and it's happened immediately. This is amazing. Senna goes off at the first corner, but what has happened to Prost? He has gone off too. Well, that is amazing, but I fear absolutely predictable.
It's important to have some rules that everybody accepts, and if you have any weakness in terms of rules in this kind of environment, it's finished. So that's why what I don't like at the moment.
The end of another controversial season then, and the teams prepare for Adelaide and the 500th World Championship race. In Australia, they know how to put on a Grand Prix and also how to celebrate a special one.
Australia is go, and Prost leaps up from behind, tucks in behind Mansell. And he's going for it. Mansell gave a second.
Berger got a problem there. I think it may have been a missed gear. Let's see.
There you saw the Ferrari running wide, but it's Berger still there, and Piquet is ahead of Alain Prost.
And Nelson Piquet's getting alongside Berger. He's lined up and he's got inside him. Straight line speed of the Ferrari. Mansell hopes will carry him past Griard. Will it, will it, will it? He's going to have to be brave on the brakes, and he did it.
That is Senna. This is incredible. Ayrton Senna, there's his car. Ayrton Senna is not going to win the Australian Grand Prix. Sack.
Oh, he's having a go. Oh.
Formula One racing to me was not fun, exhilaration, excitement.
Obviously it had its high points and it had its low points. Far too many of the latter, actually.
It's enabled me to earn my living in a business which I enjoy.
Formula One Grand Prix motor racing has given me everything I have in life.
Now, I'm just learning it. Now I quite like motor racing. I didn't ever really like it very much when I was doing it.
You have to drive racing cars with your heart and your head for it. The main thing is the heart.
Well, it's a fulfillment of a childhood ambition, basically. As a child, with my father racing, I wanted to be a Grand Prix driver. I dreamt about it. And that dream, through the help of my family, has become a reality. And
what I done was very, very good, and I'd like to do a little bit more.
It's been an incredible, fascinating, at times magical experience.
It has enabled me, I think, to visit 18 different countries and to have a life better than I could possibly imagine anybody else having.
But it's something that, together with the difficulties, with the frustrations, and the good feelings, the positive things come above all so far. And as long as they continue that way, I'll be racing not only with my heart, but with my mind and my soul.